Now that the pain of losing in the first round after winning the East has subsided, Heat fans are excited. They've got $27 million in cap space. I mean, other than Dallas, only really crappy teams have that much, like the Thunder or the Spurs or the Knicks. Pat Riley has been planning for this summer for years, and then every single superstar re-signed with his team, basically. Giannis, Paul George, LeBron James, all not in Miami. So, what do you do with all that money? It's actually one of the most interesting offseason storylines in the NBA. And at the end of this video, I'll explain the one thing Miami must do to make almost any trade for a superstar. Yo, it's Casey. This is AM Hoops. Hit subscribe for 5 videos per week, always dropping at 5 Eastern on Wednesdays. We always look at one team's offseason. And honestly, we have the draft coming up, and then we have free agency. So a lot of these offseason storylines are about to be written for me. Right now, it's sort of predictions. I don't know what we're going to do after free agency is done, but what I want you to do is put in the comments what team you want me to do next, because I always need to figure it out. Today, I figured let's do the Miami Heat, and their basics are $27 million in cap space if they renounce a bunch of free agents. The draft, they've got nothing. No first-round picks, no second-round picks. Needs depth at every position, and the relevant free agents, Duncan Robinson and Kendrick Nunn, are both restricted. Then you got Victor Oladipo and Nemanja Bjelica. Now, before we get into how much cap space they'll actually have, it depends on what happens to Kendrick Nunn and Duncan Robinson. So both guys are restricted free agents, which means that they'll get paid, but how will they get paid? Either one, the Heat offer them each a contract, or two, someone else offers them a contract, and then the Heat can decide to match it or not to keep them. The problem with letting someone else set that number for you is that someone else could really like Kendrick Nunn or Duncan Robinson and say, we're going to price you out. I mean, Nunn was second place rookie of the year, and last season was his best. He shot 51% from the field, 40% from three with just one turnover a game. Obviously, somebody could overpay for that. Do you want to risk it? Now, for Duncan Robinson, he is everything that every NBA team needs. He is young, he is healthy, and he is a shooter. So what are the Heat going to do? I think they should lock down Duncan Robinson with a big deal and let the market decide on Kendrick Nunn. I am not afraid of another team stealing him. There's just too many really good point guards in this free agent class. Lonzo Ball, Kyle Lowry, Mike Conley, Spencer Dinwiddie. I don't think another team is going to price out the Heat for Kendrick Nunn with all those guys on the market. So bring him back on a deal worth like $11 million a year, which is really team friendly. But if he can get more elsewhere, go ahead and leave. Good job, Kendrick Nunn, who was once undrafted. It's a great story. Look, he's not as effective in the playoffs anyway, and the Heat are trying to win now. Instead, I think they should focus on getting a veteran point guard like Kyle Lowry. This move plus one other would set the Heat up for a deep playoff run. Lowry is great friends with Jimmy Butler. If the Heat can spend big on Duncan Robinson, let go of Andre Iguodala and Goran Dragic, they could afford Lowry or someone like him in free agency. Now, it would be tough for him to leave the Raptors, yes, but he needs to move on. I mean, the glory days are over. It is rebuild time. They're going to draft someone at number 4 to replace Lowry, like Jalen Suggs if they get lucky. If not Lowry, Spencer Dinwiddie or somebody else, but the Heat have to bring in a veteran point guard. The final move here with their cap space is to extend Jimmy Butler. He could get as much as $181 million, taking him to age 36. Obviously, the Heat don't want to pay him that much. They're like, okay, you're not a championship number 1. How about instead of the max you can get, why don't you take like $151 million? And of course, Jimmy is going to say, no thanks, I'd rather bet on myself, and if I ball out, you're going to be forced to pay me the max, or I'll walk away. And that leverage is key, because as the Heat look at the other free agents next year, they say, okay, worst case scenario, we play this game of chicken with Jimmy and he walks. Who are we going to replace him with? Well, the top free agents are James Harden, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Kawhi Leonard. Those are the guys I think who are good enough to replace Jimmy Butler, and you'd feel good about it. But the problem is, I don't see any of those guys leaving their team to play with the Heat. And even if it was James Harden, I think he's an upgrade from Jimmy Butler, but I'd rather have Jimmy, to be honest. So because of that leverage, they almost have to pay Jimmy Butler the max, unless he wants to take a pay cut and be a team player so that they can have more depth going forward. So if the Heat do everything in that plan, then they have no more cap space left. So what about Victor Oladipo? Vic hurt himself again last year while on the Heat, but good news, a doctor says, hey, I looked in there and the previous surgeon botched that operation. So we'll fix that injury and he'll be back. Except that sounds really sketchy. I mean, anytime I hear botched operation, I don't want to give that guy a big contract. So instead, I would give him a 1-year prove-it deal for that $9.5 million mid-level exception if they spend their cap space. So if Oladipo, again, like Kendrick Nunn, can get more money elsewhere, more power to him. But really, it feels like he's another DeMarcus Cousins or Isaiah Thomas tragic injury story. And if he's not, let him prove it for 1 year, which sucks for a guy who wanted a $100 million contract. But if Oladipo really wants to be in Miami, as bad as we've all heard, then he'll take the deal. Plus, the Heat have the leverage. They have so many guards. They can tell Oladipo, you can take this or leave it. Or they could blow it all up with a trade of Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson on a sign and trade, Precious Achiuwa, Andre Iguodala, and 2 firsts for Damian Lillard. And if you believe the reports or not, this dude will request a trade, and Miami is a preferred destination. The problem? Dame is in demand, and no one that I just mentioned in that trade package is an all-star. And the Blazers are going to have plenty of all-stars to choose from. But the one wild card is if the Heat are willing to trade Bam Adebayo. Then Miami's a threat. Otherwise, that's their strongest offer to get a superstar at point guard. Another deal they could do, Tyler Hero and Andre Iguodala for Miles Turner. The Heat only do this if they want to win now, because they don't need Hero with all that guard depth I mentioned. A free agent point guard like Kyle Lowry, Victor Oladipo, Kendrick Nunn, Duncan Robinson. So they flip Hero for a defensive powerhouse in the front court. Turner's exactly what they missed last year. And by the way, they have to fix that hole in the front court next to Bam anyway. So why not fix it with Turner when you have all this guard depth? If all it costs you is Tyler Hero. Somebody next to Bam who can defend and space the floor would be perfect. It hurts to let Hero go, but Turner's a vet who is ready to win in the postseason now. Next up, free agent targets. And look, we already mentioned the big names to get with cap space. Kyle Lowry, Spencer Dinwiddie, Mike Conley, all that. But they're going to have to get other role players for depth, either with their biannual exception or you could pay on a vet's minimum. And that short list of guys that I'm looking at is JaVale McGee, Kelly Olynyk, James Johnson, JaMychal Green, or even Jeff Green if he wants to leave the Nets. So the big picture is the window is open now. The Heat made the finals last year and Pat Riley is aggressive. I don't expect them to bring everyone back and try again. I mean, even when they were in the bubble finals, the Lakers dominated. What they will do is pounce on any superstar that becomes available. It could be Damian Lillard, it could be Bradley Beal or somebody else, but because of that, I wouldn't hate bringing back Goran Dragic and Andre Iguodala so that they can have salary to match any big trade. And that is the one thing that they might have to do to make a big superstar trade. If a big name becomes available, say goodbye to those big contracts and Tyler Hero plus Duncan Robinson. Because the only draft pick Miami has to trade is their 2028 first. The only way to get more would be to lift future protections, which exposes them in later years. But they could do that if they had to for a really great player. It could be this offseason or during the season, but this front office will make a win now move soon. And so will plenty of other teams, because we're trying to get done all these 30 teams, which we're not going to do before free agency, so I'm not sure what we're going to do. Check out the offseason playlist and comment down below what team you want next.